Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. In a dramatic turn during the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as covered by Inner City Press, the courtroom fell into a hushed stillness when an unforeseen witness was summoned. Jada Pinkett Smith, the renowned actress, entrepreneur, and spouse of Will Smith. As she approached the stand, visibly steadying herself, the air grew heavy with anticipation. Her testimony would unveil a startling revelation, one she described as both unsettling and profound. She recounted an encounter from 2004 when Diddy allegedly invited her to a private meeting and presented her with a document he termed a loyalty agreement. Far from a standard contract or collaboration, she described it as something far more ominous, a binding vow of secrecy and acquiescence. When she declined to sign, Jada claimed Diddy fixed her with a cold stare and issued a cryptic warning: "You'll pay for this in the next life." Her words reverberated through the courtroom, sending ripples of shock among those present. The atmosphere was already charged when the bailiff announced Jada Pinkett Smith's name, prompting murmurs of surprise from the gallery. Even the prosecution appeared caught off guard, hinting that her appearance might have been a spontaneous decision, possibly driven by Jada herself. Dressed in a somber black suit, her expression guarded yet resolute, she swore the oath and began to speak. "I know this is unexpected," she said, her voice steady, "but I can no longer remain silent." What followed was a bombshell moment in the trial, as Jada, known for her candor, advocacy, and high-profile career, disclosed a secret she had guarded for nearly 2 decades, a disturbing interaction with Diddy involving what she described as a coercive pact. Jada explained to the court that she had been closely following the trial's developments, absorbing the accounts of others, women, assistants, and colleagues who had spoken of intimidation, peculiar documents, and subtle threats. These testimonies stirred something within her, prompting her to reconsider an unsettling experience she had once brushed off as merely odd behavior from Diddy. Now she saw it as part of a broader, more sinister pattern. "I don't need to hide anymore," she declared. "What I need is to speak the truth. Back then, I glimpsed something unsettling, but now I see the full scope of it." From the defense table, Diddy appeared visibly rattled, his composure faltering as Jada spoke. His legal team quickly moved to have her testimony struck, arguing it was irrelevant, but the judge overruled, stating, "If her account corroborates other witnesses, it may point to a larger pattern." Bracing herself, Jada recounted the chilling details of her 2004 meeting with Diddy, where he allegedly pressed her to sign what he called a spiritual agreement. Her testimony, now laid bare, gripped the courtroom and promised to fuel headlines worldwide. Jada Pinkett Smith continued her testimony, recounting the unsettling details of her 2004 meeting with Sean Diddy Combs, which took place in a luxurious, dimly lit suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. She explained that she had been invited under the guise of discussing a potential joint venture focused on philanthropy, blending music, activism, and community outreach, a project that seemed aligned with Diddy's public persona. "It felt plausible," she told the court. "It was the kind of initiative I thought he might propose." Upon arriving, she found Diddy alone, dressed entirely in white, with soft jazz playing from a small speaker. The room's curtains were closed, casting a muted glow, and the atmosphere felt oddly staged. He offered her champagne, which she declined. He was composed, almost too composed, she recalled, as if every moment had been carefully planned. After brief small talk, Diddy stepped away to a small bar area in the suite, retrieving a sleek black leather folder. Without explanation, he handed it to her. Jada assumed it contained a project proposal or a contract. Instead, the folder bore the words, "Loyalty Agreement." Initially, she thought it might be a prank. "I laughed and said, 'What is this, some kind of music industry cult nonsense?'" she recounted. But Diddy's expression remained serious. He replied softly, "It's for our mutual protection." Inside was a typed document, roughly 7 pages, devoid of any legal firm's letterhead or professional markings. Yet its contents were chilling. Jada described clauses that demanded absolute secrecy about all personal and professional matters, references to aligning with an inner circle, and phrases that disturbingly called for surrendering one's essence to the legacy's greater purpose. She noted the language felt eerie, almost otherworldly, as if it belonged to an ancient covenant. The document, she testified, alluded vaguely to unnamed figures, ritual-like obligations, and severe consequences for disloyalty. It didn't demand money or intellectual property, but instead insisted on perpetual silence, obedience, and compliance. At the document's end was a signature line, her name already typed beneath it. "I felt nauseated," Jada said. "It was like being recruited into something shadowy, something I couldn't grasp." She returned the folder to Diddy and firmly declined. At that moment, she said, his demeanor shifted, his gaze growing cold and intense. In court, Jada recited portions of the document from memory, explaining that the original had inexplicably vanished from her home years ago. "It haunted me so deeply that I memorized entire sections," she told the jury. One clause, she recalled, stated that the signer vowed to maintain confidentiality not only in this existence but through all spiritual realms beyond. Another declared that knowledge shared in sacred spaces must remain unspoken, whether in courts, sanctuaries, or public forums. Jada said she had laughed nervously when she first read these lines, asking Diddy, "Are you saying this agreement binds me even after death?" His response, she claimed, was a chilling, "Now you're understanding." The document also outlined a structure of secrecy, with tiers of knowledge accessible only through acts of loyalty. It mentioned trials, assemblies, and an undefined term, the selection, which appeared multiple times. One particularly ominous passage read, "To violate silence is to sever the bond, and severing the bond brings consequences, both divine and beyond." Jada's testimony painted a picture of a document that felt less like a contract and more like a binding, almost mystical pact, leaving the courtroom gripped by its unsettling implications. As Jada Pinkett Smith continued her testimony, a profound silence enveloped the courtroom. Jurors shifted uncomfortably, and some spectators appeared visibly disturbed by her words. Jada emphasized that she was entirely sober during the 2004 encounter and was not embellishing for effect. "This was real," she insisted. "It wasn't a stunt or a jest. He genuinely believed in that document and thought I'd eventually agree to it." She refused, and that's when Diddy delivered the chilling warning that still haunted her. "You'll regret it in the next life." The memory of that moment lingered with her for years, and she admitted to feeling as though an unseen weight had trailed her ever since. When Jada declined to sign the so-called loyalty agreement, she described a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere, one she called almost otherworldly, but not in a comforting way. The jazz music ceased and Diddy's demeanor turned cold. Leaning closer, his voice dropped to a slow, deliberate cadence as if reciting a well-practiced line. "You'll regret it in the next life, not this one," he said, his eyes locked on hers. Jada told the jury she couldn't discern whether his words implied a physical threat or something more metaphysical. "It felt like a hex," she said, as if he believed he held some eternal authority. The courtroom grew still again. When the prosecutor asked if she took the threat seriously, Jada replied without pause, "Completely." It wasn't a game to him, and in that moment, it stopped being one to me. Diddy didn't stop at the warning, Jada testified. He calmly outlined the consequences of defying him, speaking as if he had delivered the speech before. He suggested that acting roles might vanish, projects could inexplicably collapse, and key industry contacts, producers and collaborators, might suddenly become unreachable. He warned that people close to her might pull away, citing their own safety. "He never raised his voice or laid a hand on me," Jada said, "but it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had in this industry." Then, she recalled, he flashed a practiced, almost smug smile and said, "Take your time to think it over. Everyone comes around eventually." Shaken, Jada left the suite without a word, avoiding eye contact. As she reached her car, she was trembling so violently she struggled to insert the key into the ignition. "I saw a side of him I wasn't meant to see," she told the court. "That's when I realized whatever he's involved in, it's far bigger than just parties or gossip." Following that unnerving 2004 encounter, Jada chose silence. Not out of complicity, but out of fear. On the stand, she confessed that this fear clung to her like a persistent shadow for years. At industry events, she found herself wondering who else might have been presented with a similar agreement. She began scanning rooms for telltale signs, a glimpse of that black leather folder, a whispered phrase, or the same hollow intensity she'd seen in Diddy's eyes. Over time, she noticed a disturbing pattern. Talented women with once bright careers seemed to fade from the spotlight. Some stopped giving interviews altogether, their silence stark and unexplained. As Jada Pinkett Smith pressed on with her testimony, the courtroom remained gripped by an uneasy stillness. Some jurors appeared visibly troubled, while spectators exchanged stunned glances. Jada stressed that her account was neither exaggerated nor driven by ulterior motives. "I wasn't under the influence, and this wasn't for attention," she said firmly. "He genuinely believed in that document's power and expected me to comply." When she refused, Diddy issued the chilling warning that still echoed in her mind. "You'll regret it in the next life." That moment, she said, left an indelible mark, and though she walked away, a lingering sense of unease followed her for years. After rejecting the so-called loyalty agreement, Jada described a shift in the room's energy, one she called almost supernatural but deeply unsettling. The music stopped abruptly and Diddy's face hardened. Leaning closer, he spoke in a low, deliberate tone as if reciting a familiar script. "You'll regret it in the next life. Not this one," he said. Jada told the jury she couldn't tell if it was a physical threat or something more metaphysical, but it felt like a curse. "It was as if he thought he could wield some eternal control," she said. When the prosecutor asked if she took the threat seriously, she replied without hesitation, "Absolutely." It wasn't a joke to him, and it became deadly serious to me. Diddy's warnings didn't end there, Jada testified. In a calm, almost rehearsed manner, he outlined what might happen if she defied him. Acting roles could vanish, projects might inexplicably stall, and industry connections, producers, collaborators, could suddenly cut ties. He suggested that people close to her might distance themselves for their own protection. "He never raised his voice or touched me," she said, "but it was the most terrifying moment of my career." Then, with a calculated smile, he added, "Think it over. Everyone comes back eventually." Jada left the suite immediately, her heart racing. As she reached her car, she was trembling so badly she struggled to start the engine. "I saw something in him I wasn't meant to see," she told the court. "That's when I knew his world was far bigger and darker than the rumors suggested." For years after that 2004 encounter, Jada chose silence, not out of complicity but out of fear. She admitted on the stand that the experience cast a long shadow, haunting her at industry events where she wondered who else had been approached with similar agreements. She began noticing subtle signs, a fleeting glance, a coded phrase, or the same hollow intensity she'd seen in Diddy's eyes. She also observed a troubling pattern. Promising female artists who once shone brightly would suddenly retreat from public life, some ceasing to give interviews altogether, their silence eerie and unexplained. Others remained in Diddy's circle, but their discomfort was palpable in photos or videos, as if they were ensnared in something unspeakable. Jada confessed that the fear lingered in recurring nightmares and strange incidents, like anonymous phone calls with no voice on the line, only silence. "I started journaling to process it," she said, "but I burned the pages, terrified someone might find them." She didn't even tell her husband, Will Smith, for years, fearing he'd dismiss her as paranoid. But as the trial unfolded, with former assistants and dancers describing NDAs, coercion, and cryptic spiritual language, Jada recognized echoes of her own experience. "I realized it wasn't just me," she said. "I wasn't imagining things. He was doing this to others." Testifying was a difficult choice, Jada admitted, knowing it would reopen old wounds, draw media scrutiny, and possibly put her at risk again. "I once thought silence would keep me safe," she told the jury. "Now I see it's what shields him." The prosecution then introduced 2 additional loyalty agreements recovered from investigations into Diddy's former employees and associates. Though formatted differently, the documents bore striking similarities to Jada's account, with clauses demanding silence beyond this life, references to eternal obligations, and a focus on sacrificing for a legacy. One came from a former assistant who received a similar folder in 2007. Another was from a dancer on a 2010 world tour. Jurors examined the exhibits, visibly shaken by the parallels. A forensic handwriting expert testified that handwritten notes, underlinings, and a recurring symbol, an eye within a circle, on all 3 documents matched Diddy's writing. When asked if she recognized the symbol, Jada nodded gravely. "He called it the Watcher," she said. "He claimed it protected him and punished those who betrayed his mission." Diddy's legal team objected, labeling the documents forgeries and accusing the prosecution of orchestrating a conspiracy, but the judge overruled, citing the consistency across 3 independent accounts and the forensic evidence as grounds for further scrutiny. The courtroom was rattled. One spectator fainted during the reading of the 3rd document and was escorted out. What emerged was no longer just a celebrity scandal, but something far more unsettling, a system that resembled a cult cloaked in the guise of loyalty. Jada's composed yet haunting testimony revealed a web of fear, silence, and control. She spoke of avoiding certain industry figures and declining lavish invitations, suspecting they were tied to Diddy's net. She described coded phrases like upstairs room, midnight circle, and bringing your aura, which signaled invitations into his inner circle. "There are entire social calendars built around who's hosting what," she said. "If it's Diddy, you know what's at stake." On red carpets, she noticed other female artists exchanging knowing looks when Diddy was near, their silent acknowledgement speaking volumes. Jada admitted to quietly warning others over the years, dropping subtle hints to steer them away from danger without revealing her full story, which felt too risky. Some heeded her advice, others didn't, and a few seemed to vanish from public life soon after. She also shared that several individuals had confided in her about similar encounters with Diddy, offers of elite opportunities in exchange for signing agreements that demanded unwavering loyalty and silence. "It was always presented as a privilege, never a threat," she said, but the threat was woven into every word. Jada believed many who had worked with Diddy and later faded from view weren't simply taking breaks, but had been harmed by the very system they were drawn into. Her voice steady but heavy, she concluded, "If this trial hadn't happened, I'd have stayed silent forever. But it's time. People think saying no to power is the worst thing you can do." Jada Pinkett Smith's testimony reached a crescendo as she declared, "I promise you, the real danger is staying silent and letting that power fester unchecked." Throughout her account, the courtroom's attention intermittently shifted to Sean "Diddy" Combs, whose reaction spoke volumes. Initially, he sat back in his chair, his face a mask of detachment, as if carefully controlling his emotions. But as Jada recounted their 2004 encounter and recited fragments of the so-called loyalty agreement, his composure began to crack. He leaned forward, massaging his temples, while his defense attorney whispered urgently, only to be met with terse nods or dismissive gestures. The most striking moments came when Jada quoted his own words back to him. When she repeated, "You'll regret it in the next life," Diddy visibly recoiled. As she described the cryptic watcher symbol, he averted his gaze, avoiding eye contact with her, the jury, or anyone else in the room. For the first time in the trial, he appeared caught off guard, unprepared for the weight of her words. Courtroom sketch artists captured the tension, their drawings quickly spreading online. One journalist noted that Diddy's expression seemed haunted, a description that resonated with onlookers. Whispers rippled through the gallery, prompting the judge to call for order twice. At one point, Diddy began scribbling frantically on a notepad, his movements betraying agitation. His legal team requested a sidebar, reportedly urging the judge to strike Jada's testimony, but the judge rebuffed them, stating, "This witness came forward of her own accord. Her account is pertinent to the broader claims." The atmosphere grew even more charged when Jada highlighted the eerie similarities between her loyalty agreement and those described by others. Observers noted Diddy's hand trembling as he wiped his face, a sign that his usual control was slipping. One courtroom spectator posted online, "He's unraveling. He's not the one steering this anymore." Jada avoided looking at Diddy throughout her testimony until its final moments. When asked if she had a closing statement, she turned to face him directly for the first time and said, "You warned me I'd regret saying no, but look around you now. You're the one answering for this, not me." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, the moment charged with a palpable intensity. For the first time, the silence that had once shielded Diddy felt like it was giving way to accountability, delivered through Jada's unflinching words. As Jada stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom remained in a state of stunned silence. But beyond its walls, her testimony was already sending shockwaves through the entertainment world. Headlines erupted online with phrases like "Jada exposes Diddy's chilling pact," spreading rapidly across news outlets and social media. The impact of her words was undeniable, igniting conversations about a system of control that had long been whispered about but rarely confronted so openly. Jada Pinkett Smith's testimony unleashed a firestorm, with headlines like "Jada unveils Diddy's eerie loyalty pact" and "Hollywood's cult-like contract culture exposed," dominating news cycles. Social media erupted with cryptic posts from celebrities, some subtly supportive, others laced with unease, fueling speculation about who else might have encountered the ominous loyalty agreement. A-list names trended as fans and commentators connected long-ignored rumors to unexplained career downturns and sudden disappearances from the public eye. Podcasts poured over Jada's every word, while journalists began linking her account to broader patterns of coercion in the entertainment industry. Her courtroom revelations had sparked a movement. The district attorney's office announced plans to issue additional subpoenas, reportedly investigating similar patterns tied to Diddy's contracts, shell companies, and the legal teams that enforced silence. A legal expert on a major news network described the potential fallout. "If these documents are authentic and more voices come forward, this could dwarf the Weinstein scandal in scope." Jada's courage had not only exposed one individual but illuminated a chilling network. What made her testimony particularly unsettling was its spiritual dimension. Diddy's alleged belief in agreements that transcended mortality, his use of the Watcher symbol, and his veiled threats framed as otherworldly prophecies. He wasn't just silencing people, Jada testified. He was trying to claim ownership over them. The judge ordered a thorough review of Jada's claims, bolstered by her credibility and public stature. Even skeptics acknowledged she had little to gain and everything to lose by testifying. As the session concluded, a hush settled over the courtroom, a calm before an inevitable storm. Outside, the world was watching, and accountability loomed. In the days following, Jada reportedly received private messages, not from fans or media, but from fellow celebrities. Quiet phone calls, anonymous texts, and discreet DMs from industry peers carried a common refrain: "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." Sources close to the courthouse revealed that several previously reluctant individuals were now contacting the district attorney's office, inspired by Jada's bravery. Her testimony had fractured the wall of silence, and the floodgates were beginning to open. Unbeknownst to many, Jada had tried to sound the alarm years earlier. In early 2016, she reportedly met privately with Beyoncé, Solange, and two other prominent women in the music industry for what was framed as a casual gathering. No press, no assistance, just candid conversation. Amid the discussion, Jada raised a warning about Diddy. She urged them to steer clear of any offers tied to spiritual or legacy-driven agreements from him or his circle. "Don't engage, don't be courteous, just walk away," she allegedly advised. When Beyoncé pressed her for details, Jada reportedly said, "He thinks he's untouchable. It's not about agreement, it's about control. When you say no, you're not just rejecting a person, you're defying something darker." No one else at the table spoke up, but Jada later recalled seeing flickers of recognition, discomfort, and perhaps guilt in their eyes. This detail emerged in a sidebar interview with a close friend of Jada's who shared that Jada hadn't wanted to start a public battle, but felt compelled to protect others discreetly. She feared that without someone speaking out, Diddy's influence would only grow bolder. The ripple effects of her testimony continued to spread. Several production companies linked to Diddy's name faced scrutiny for coercive contracts. A music streaming platform quietly removed curated playlists featuring artists allegedly tied to his inner circle. A fashion brand scrapped an unreleased campaign that included archival images of Diddy with the tagline, "Legacy Endures." Jada, meanwhile, has remained silent since her testimony, deliberately stepping back from the media frenzy. A source close to her explained, "She said what needed to be said on the stand. Now she wants the world to grapple with it without distortion." Her decision to speak, however, marked a pivotal break in a decades-long chain of fear. Inspired by her courage, others are now stepping forward, signaling that the era of silence may finally be crumbling.